So for the longest time, I've wondered why my ex-wife was so ready all of a sudden, right after the divorce, to encourage my kids to believe that whatever they did, whatever they thought, whatever, they believed about themselves was 100% true. Whether it be they want to change from being a boy to a girl to a boy, or even a fennel fox. My ex-wife, started just encouraging all this madness in my kids and, affirming it. That's what she calls it is, if you love your kids, you will affirm your kids. You will support your kids. Even in, the depths of mental illness, saying, that all of a sudden a girl can be a boy and they're really actually a boy. And not only are they actually a boy, not only do we have to affirm that, but also she had no resistance to signing them up on hormones and, therapy, gender affirming therapy. And no pushback whatsoever. It was like one day before we were divorced, my ex-wife was not very supportive of that, and my ex-wife would have, kind of a resistance to it. My oldest daughter mentioned that to me while we were in Ireland, like a month before the divorce, and then all of a sudden, it went from being like, no, like I don't think so, to yeah, absolutely, you're totally a boy. Let's get you down to the gender affirming care institution and get you some hormones. And then my other daughter started saying she was a fennel fox. And my ex-wife was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Whatever you think you are, you are. And I did a lot of research on this. And it just recently came to me is that when I'm looking up these parental alienation videos, a lot of these kids that grow up to realize what's actually happening, one of them said, it was really strange to me that, I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and my mom would confide in me all of her marital problems and, talk to me about how horrible my dad was. And, and for me, she was saying that it seemed like, my mom trusted me with this information, like I was, adult enough or, mature enough to understand it. And she confided in me, and it made me feel grown up. It made me feel special.
This is so messed up, but I remember being a child and my mom would tell me all these things, even as young as 7. She would tell me things about their marriage, things that my dad was doing, lies usually, or horrible exaggerations. And I would feel a sense of pride that my mom thought I was mature enough to handle that sort of information, when in reality I was 7. That's abusive. To involve your child and stress them out about their parents' marriage is actually manipulative and emotionally abusive. But in my little head, I had to rationalize it somehow. I didn't have the language for emotional abuse. I didn't know what was up or what was down. I just thought, wow, my mom must think I'm really mature to be able to talk to me about this problem in her marriage.
And that's what it really comes down to, is this affirmation of, yeah, you're, grown enough to decide if you're a boy or a girl, or you're, even at like young ages, like 13, 14, 15, is like when my daughter started getting this gender affirming care. And, even younger for my daughter, who started deciding she was a fennel fox. And this all came after, my ex-wife married a ladyboy. After we got divorced, my ex-wife sought out a very deranged person to marry. And it's not just me saying that. I've talked to his oldest son, who is also transgender, and he says the same exact thing. Like, this guy was manipulative, he was, mentally abusive, and, his son testified, I guess, whether he started out as a girl and turned into a boy or vice versa. I think that's how it was. He started out as a girl, turned into a boy. Anyway, I went to court. Like, these are court records in family court. That's what he said in court. And then I spoke to him, and he said the same thing about this guy. But this is the kind that my ex-wife was seeking out, because she knows that Well, she was also this when I met her, a dedicated, follower of Christ. She gave her life to Jesus months before I met her at her brother's church. And so for all of those years we were married, that's who she was. Until I started mentioning, hey, we need to get a divorce. She had really attacked me in front of people and started being very disrespectful to me and betraying me in front of not only just random people, but also relatives and my children. She attacked me over porn, which I had told her about in confidence. In private, I told her that we're not intimate enough, and I'm turning to porn. And so she decides that it was a great opportunity to embarrass me and emasculate me in front of my children and my in-laws. And so I think good. And then so that's when I was it was when I was in a car accident. I was in a wheelchair. I was totally overwhelmed by prescription medication, narcotics, and whatnot, and I couldn't move. I was in a wheelchair, and she took this as this opportunity to emasculate me. And so shortly after that, I filed for divorce, and then I filed again in Hawaii. So once in Idaho, once in Hawaii, I filed, and then I took it back. But at this point, this is when she decided that she's going to change teams, and she had 3 different women calling her wife, one of which told me at my son's birthday that she wanted to have sex with her. She wanted to be romantic with her if I wasn't married to her, she said. This lady, Joey Tyra was her name. She was also married to a man, but she's the conversation started out with, I feel like I'm more of a lesbian than I ever felt before. And she had 3 trans kids and all this other mess going on. And then she had 2 girls in Ireland, a friend of, the baby mamas of my daughter's mother and sister called her wife. And just, really odd behavior all of a sudden once I mentioned divorce. So she, it just depends on the team. It doesn't depend on her convictions or what she really believes. It's just whatever side is going to give her the most benefits, that's what team she's on. And so to work against me, who she knows is, a follower of Christ, a disciple, a pupil of Christ, she's going to go to the other team and start hanging out with LGBT and anything LGBT. Like I'd say 90% of her friends at the end of our marriage were LGBT people. And then she marries a lady boy, and now all my kids are trans this and trans that. But it's like this woman said who, grew up and realized that the parental alienation started when her mother started giving her undeserved trust about very private issues between her father and the mother, saying, oh yeah, your father's this, your father's that, your father's this, and really just, degrading and emasculating this woman's father when she was very young, preteen girl, started hearing all these horrible things about her father, but she felt blessed. She felt trusted and, mature because her mother trusted her with this information about her father, who she never really understood. It wasn't something she had witnessed, but since her mother told her, she believed her. But it made her feel special. It made her feel mature. It made her feel, validated that her mother trusted her with all this very adult information. And for me, I've given my kids trust, but they earn it slowly. When my kids will work for me, they've worked at almost every business we've had. We've had 7 brick and mortar stores. I have anyway. I've had 7 brick and mortar stores, and my kids help build all of them and help with product design and marketing and bringing customers in and everything, answering calls. My 3-year-old, my oldest, was answering calls for our business in the cutest way when she was 3 and 4 years old. And so when they earn trust, I give them more trust, but for positive things, not for negative things, not for emasculating their mother or vice versa, how it was between her mother and me, or creating any division or, whatever in the family, or, any kind of damage to our co-parenting situation. I never would do that with them. I'd never trust them to say, oh, well, your mom is such and such, and your mom did this and that. Like even when we were in therapy, it's all recorded, and when we were talking, when I first got back, like a couple months after we got divorced, and I got back to Hawaii, and I jump in the car to go home from the airport with my kids in the car, and immediately they're like, Mom basically wants us to pick sides. She said all these horrible, horrible things about you, and I don't get it. I don't understand what's going on, Dad. And I would be like, it's okay. I understand. Your mom's upset. I guess I broke her heart. We got divorced, and I'm sorry. I thought that's what she wanted. I thought she wanted to go and be with all these lesbians and, do this other life and, have this other situation. I'm sorry that's, what happened, but that's what happened. And at this point, she was already like married to this ladyboy fella. So I guess that is what she wanted, was to go and do this LGBT thing. But that's what it really is. When she affirms them like, yeah, you really are a boy, even though you were born a girl. Yeah, I believe you're a boy. Or you are a fennel fox, if you believe it. That's right. And it's like affirmation above all things. Rather than telling them the truth, rather than giving them correction, rather than giving them guidance, she's like, yeah. Affirmation's number one here. We got to do affirmation. Affirmation first. Affirmation above all things. And I'm like, no, I'd rather be hated for telling the truth than liked for telling a lie. And she would rather be liked above all things. And, especially in this divorce where, she wants them to pick sides. That's what it really comes down to. So I'll play you this video. Anyway, this is where it comes from.
Mom's paperwork.
And I got to the point where I resented going with my father. I would yell at him. I would say, I hate you. Why are you doing this?
It was always ingrained in me that my mom was the enemy and that I shouldn't want to see her.
And how much of a liar she was, and all these terrible things about her that I knew wasn't true.
What goes through the mind of a child trained to hate a parent? We talked to Candace, who was brave enough to come forward.
I became deeply fearful of my dad. Iranian culture is not exactly popular in the United States, and my mom showed me that film Not Without My Daughter.
We're not going back, we're staying here. I want us to live in Iran.
And told me this is what your dad's culture is. They're all kidnappers, they want to steal children and hurt women. She really wanted to erase our identity.